finish this review, I'm gonna have to be invulnerable. Ha! You thought I was gonna say. Hello interwebs and welcome to Jessie Gender After Dark, where the nerdy gets sexy and the sexy gets nerdy. Is that a good slogan? I don't know if that's a good. I'm still workshopping the slogan for this this channel, so if you have any suggestions, let me know down in the down below. But regardless, this is my brand new channel here where I share all my reviews, all my dorky, nerdy things that I love. I'm just mashing words together at this point. But regardless, this is going to be where I share all my geeky and nerdy likes and do reviews, do trailer reactions, analyses of different things, stuff like that. It's just going to be a place where all of us can sort of relax and dork out and geek out, and it should be a fun time. And for today's video, I am finally going to be reviewing Invincible Season 1. And oh my gosh, I am honestly so excited to talk about this show. I'm actually a little bit disappointed that I didn't review it week to week because this show was absolutely amazing. On top of my Falcon and the Winter Soldier stuff, it would have been a little bit tough to do both shows, but both shows were equally deserving, and honestly, this show has quickly become a fan favorite of mine, and you know, I don't want to oversell it yet considering it's only in the first season, but it really feels like it has that Game of Thronesian level of like intrigue and excitement to it for me. I know it's not like the cultural touchstone that Game of Thrones was for everybody in basically the entire world, it seemed like, talking about it, but for the show, this show really has that character depth, that intriguing plot arc, the mystery behind it, and yet linking that mystery up with like emotional characters that I just deeply care about, and storylines that I deeply care about, even outside of the mystery being set up. So let's quick dive into it. As should be obvious, this is going to be a spoiler heavy review because honestly, it's almost impossible to talk about this show without diving headlong into spoilers. So if you want as spoiler free a review as I can give for those of you who may not have seen the show, I did review episodes 1 through 3 over on my main channel. I'll link that up here somewhere, hopefully for all of you if you want to check that out and you want a spoiler free discussion. But let's dive headlong into spoilers about this season. First things first, the mystery of this season was absolutely fantastic. Right in the first episode, right at the end, they gave us that shocker twist that Omni-Man killed all of the Guardians of the Earth? Galaxy? I wanted to say Guardians of the Galaxy, but I think they're like Guardians of the Earth. But he quickly kills Earth's top superheroes. And that created this amazing mystery of not a whodunit, because we knew who did it, but why done it. Which is such a great sort of mystery setup for tension, because we know who did it, but we don't know why. And so we're wondering, is he a good guy? Is he a bad guy? And throughout this entire season, they really play that sort of tenseness with Omni-Man to its fullest. There are so many scenes throughout this season where Omni-Man just shows up and you're sort of wondering, like, is he going to be the good guy in this situation, or is he going to be the bad guy? Is he going to go too far? Is he going to blow up an entire alien civilization like he did in some of the earlier episodes? Or is he actually going to save people? And they get a lot of mileage out of this sort of like, is he good? Is he bad? What is his true intentions here, to great effect. I think a lot of this comes down to his relationship with his wife. Deborah, Omni-Man's wife in the show, was absolutely phenomenal. It's really easy for like spouse characters in shows like this to kind of get ignored or short shrifted or kind of feel like a little bit annoying at times, sort of holding characters back. But Deborah really felt like especially in the latter half of the season, a very active presence. She was actually someone who stood up to Omni-Man as she started to investigate and learn more about the fact that he killed the Guardians. It was so exciting to see a strong sort of wife character to like a superhero like this really standing up to someone who could destroy her in a second. And she also had such an emotional depth with Mark, which is really necessary towards humanizing Mark and leading into the decision that Mark makes at the end of the season. So really fleshing Deborah out was just truly wonderful. And I just love that she would stand up to Omni-Man. The scenes where they go out on a date and she sort of reiterates why she loves him, but then there's that tenseness with like he doesn't even want to protect people because they're on a date, and sort of horror at that, and sort of her growing dread at just being married to him was just wonderfully played, and so wonderful. And I think that speaks to a lot of the storylines that I'm going to touch upon here. One of the things that I really loved about this show is that it moved along at a fairly brisk pace. Like a lot of the storylines and mysteries and character beats never stayed for too long. The status quo never stayed quo for very long on this show at all, and yet I always felt like the show gave enough time to explore each new beat, each new situation, each character dynamic that came into play. I think a lot of this is shown in the new Guardians that start to build later on in the season. There's a lot of new characters that sort of come into the dynamic. You have Robot, you have Pyro, you have Duplicate, you have Monster Girl. All of those characters sort of like are brought into that Guardian dynamic, and they're mostly stayed separate for the most of the season. But I feel like most of them do get a time to shine. I think the one character whose actual name I forget, but he was a decent character, and I'm sorry for blanking on his name, but he's the character who used to be a Guardian but lost his powers and then regains them by the end of the season. It was sort of like a mentor character. He kind of got the shortest shrift. I think Duplicate also didn't get a lot to do, but all the other characters, especially Robot and Monster Girl and Pyro and Adam Eve as well, all got a lot to do and develop them over this season. I think probably the best was Robot. Zachary Quinto amazingly played Robot, who he managed to get across that sort of Spockian, sort of emotionless type of character while still feeling like there was emotion under the surface. And so when we get the reveal that Robot was an actual living entity this entire time, it was honestly a truly shocking moment, and yet entirely believable outside of all the emotion that Zachary Quinto is able to deliver. And honestly, I'm kind of sad by the development of Robot becoming this actual person and cloning himself, because it might mean that we lose a little bit of Zachary Quinto's voice acting here. Hopefully when he's still in the suit, Zachary Quinto can still be there, because I just really love Zachary Quinto's performance. But even if Zachary Quinto doesn't come back, I think hands down he was MVP of this entire season. No doubt about that. I will say a little bit of Robot's storyline did feel a little bit short-shrifted here to a degree. I know I was talking a little bit about how everyone's storylines got fully fleshed out. I would have liked a little bit more dynamic, sort of seeing how, like, us getting to know Robot as Robot just a hair more before this development, but ultimately it was a good shock and a good turn, and I'm excited to see where this storyline goes in the future, because the idea that he took Pyro's DNA and cloned him so that he could be with Monster Girl and sort of be at her same age is, like, kind of extremely messed up if you really, really think about it. In fact, the show draws attention to how messed that up that is, that he sort of took Pyro's DNA without his permission and sort of aged himself down to be with, like, Monster Girl, who is a younger girl at this point, even though they're both older. It's such a understandable thing that he would want. It's very human, and yet very messed up in a lot of ways too. And I like that sort of morally gray area that storyline sits in. And I'm very curious to see where it goes, because it kind of gets bypassed for the big action at the end of the season, and hopefully it'll come into play in sort of more dynamics later on in this season. I think one of my major negatives on this show was all the stuff with Mark and his high school friends. His best friend William and his kind of sort of girlfriend that he doesn't want to come out to as a superhero, but then eventually does, and then it's sort of back and forth, and they have this tension. It all felt a little bit frustrating in a lot of ways, because ultimately none of that felt really new in any way, shape, or form to me. There's a reason that we haven't seen a lot of superhero TV shows or movies really kind of hinge upon the secret identity and not wanting to come out as a superhero storyline in a long time. I think the last prominent ones that I could even really think of were like the Spider-Man movies, and there's been obviously some in TV shows here and there as well, but generally that sort of storyline has fallen by the wayside because I feel like it's been very, very played out. And I feel like that element of this storyline of Mark sort of like wanting to come out to Amber and not being able to come out to her and things like that, it felt like I'd seen it all before. I did like a few of the subversions of it, like Amber actually being knowing that, was able to like piece together that Mark was invincible, and she was just waiting for him to tell her, and so she was just being treated like crap by him, waiting for him to actually tell her, and she gave him every single chance, and so she was ultimately frustrated. Like, that was a new dynamic that I really loved to see, but ultimately came very late in the season and ultimately got kind of bypassed again for the larger action at the end of the season. It wasn't bad, but it just sort of got bypassed, and I wish there was a little bit more on that, but we'll sort of see how their relation develops next season. So exciting stuff there, and I'm kind of excited that we moved past that stuff because I kind of found it boring. Overall, the dynamic wasn't really interesting. William as a character too, as sort of Mark's best friend, I could care less about him. He got a little bit more interesting towards the end of the season as well, when he started to learn again that Mark was a superhero and was able to bounce off of him in a much more dynamic and truthful way as a character, instead of being this like annoying character that Mark was trying to sidestep all the time. So again, I just didn't really vibe with a lot of the high school stuff, but I do see potential in those friendships and storylines going forward. Speaking of those relationships, Mark was a truly excellent character, was deeply, deeply humanized, and I really just ended up loving his character despite how rote I found him to be at the start of the series. He really felt like a kind of standard protagonist at the start of the series, like, yeah, I've got powers, I want to be a superhero, but you really, as the show went on, he really started to feel very human, that he was someone who aspired to be a superhero, who really wanted to be out there, but honestly just didn't know what he was doing a lot of the time, and was like making mistakes, but honest mistakes that I feel like I would have made in those same situations. Like, I related to him very, very hard. So when he made like wrong choices, like when he trusted the wrong person, or sort of set up with that, so when he went into sort of take over that gangster sort of situation that was going on there, great storyline there. And I liked seeing the guy trying to take over this sort of gangster, sort of like become the top of the totem pole sort of thing, and using Invincible to do it, but ultimately Invincible getting sort of almost killed in that situation. It honestly just, it felt like a truthful situation, like Mark wanting to help out this guy in a really dark situation, but getting in over his head, but a situation that is very understandable for someone who is compassionate, who does want to help and be a caring person, but dealing it in a world that does not really deal with in such black and white situations, and does not make it always easy for our heroes. Like, our heroes in this story may die. They are vulnerable. As much as this says that they are invincible, they are vulnerable in many ways. And I thought that that was truly just a great use of his character. Again, his storyline never felt rushed, yet it moved along at a very brisk pace. And it was just, I honestly just felt for him as the season went along. And I really just found him to be I just cared about him. I really ended up caring about him. That was honestly surprising, because I felt like he was just going to be more of a vehicle protagonist for more interesting folks. But he really just came into his own as a character. I think a lot of that on Steven Yeun, who is a phenomenal actor who I've absolutely loved. And Minari, honestly, was my best picture of this year. So just all the credit to Steven Yeun overall. So I was glad to see him here getting his due as well in such a big show like this. So in great performance by him, and really the entire cast. J.K. Simmons also being a standout as well, as Zachary Quinto also was. And the guy who played Pyro, whose name I'm forgetting, I want to say Jason Sudeikis, but that's not right at all. He's sort of one of those comedians that I sort of recognize in a bunch of different things. He played Derek in The Good Place, but again, I'm blanking on his name. But good actor, and I think he did a great job, but blanking on the actor's name. I'm just going to call him Derek, because that seems appropriate. But that brings me to the true surprising gut punch of this show, Omni-Man and his storyline. I touched upon it at the beginning of this review, but I have to bring it back full around here, because how that storyline goes is really fantastic. Like I said, there's always this push and pull tension with Omni-Man throughout the season, but when he gets outed and revealed as just a eugenicist, essentially, that he works for this Viltrum empire that wants to sort of take over galaxies. I mean, it wasn't the most surprising reveal of a character. Like, I kind of guessed that was going to end up being what the case was with him from the very first episode, that his sort of empire was the sort of eugenicist, like, we want to take over everything empire, and sort of looking down upon the small people because we're so powerful, and sort of the strongman fascist type that you could really sort of easily slot the Superman-esque type character into if you really think about it. It was, but it also felt very natural. It felt very natural, and I like that the show sort of went the natural route and sort of fit his character and everything he's saying. But when he's revealed, it is, I will have to say, despite it not being the most surprising thing, it is brutal and it is emotional. The second to last episode of the season, where Cecil, the head of the sort of the government organization trying to bring him down, just is throwing everything at him, and he knows that it is not going to work, that all he is doing is slowing him down so they can get to Mark, and just throwing literally everything at Omni-Man, and Omni-Man just crushing them, was horrifying and terrifying. And I love seeing Cecil being like a pragmatic yet understandable guy. And that's a lot of the characters in the show. Like, they make some terrible decisions morally, but you understand each and every one of them. Cecil being the most so. You see that he wants to do the right thing, but he is stuck in a situation where he has to be a pragmatist. He has to be like, this is the situation we're dealing with. I'm dealing with a man I cannot stop. So what can I do? How can I maneuver the situation? I have to do some really crappy things, like manipulate people into situations that I don't like, or send a demon to hell who was just trying to help, sort of thing. Like, he doesn't like doing those things, and you feel that through the character, but he does it because he has to. And so I thought Cecil was another just really wonderful, fleshed out character who, again, I felt for, even though I didn't always agree with him. I understood every choice that he made. And that final last episode is wonderful. But then it brings us to the finale, which I honestly just finished watching right before this. And holy crap, that finale was an honest-to-God gut punch. Mark fighting Omni-Man and standing up to him and saying, like, I believed in you and I wanted to be like you. It's a dynamic I've seen before, but the way that both Omni-Man and Mark have been humanized and their relationship has been built out this entire season, it just hit really hard to see Mark be betrayed by Omni-Man. Like, him just punching Mark into the ground was rough, was really rough. And I know a lot of people watching the show probably get turned off by the sort of a lot of gratuitous gore and blood, but I feel like in some cases it serves a real purpose. The moment where Omni-Man grabs Mark by the head and shoves him in front of the subway, and they go through the subway just killing people just willy-nilly as if they're nothing. Just ending lives like that. I have to say, I almost threw up. Like, I have a hearty stomach when it comes to gore and things in movies, but this show made me feel Mark's horror at people dying like that. Just the casual disregard that Omni-Man had for these people's lives. It was horrific. And the show made me feel that, and I think that was intentional. Yes, it is a bit gratuitous at times, but sometimes that sort of a gratuitous violence serves a purpose, and in scenes like that, it did. You felt Mark's desperation to want to save people, but ultimately knowing, like, they're just more powerful. Omni-Man's more powerful. There's nothing you can do. And so you feel this push and pull that, like, you see Omni-Man's point. We could just wipe these people out, but Mark wanting to save them nonetheless and still valuing them because they're human. They're people. They're people that deserve to have a life. Mark obviously is right, but you just see how power really warped Omni-Man's mind. And sort of obviously the indoctrination of the Viltrum Empire, which I'm sure we'll get into next season. But then the final moment where he's just punching him into the ground. And Mark says, I would have you after 500 years. I started crying. And I did not expect that. The moment where Omni-Man remembers him, like, actually caring about his son playing baseball as a child. Such a great flashback. Like, I was gut punched by it, but I felt it, and it felt real. Just magnificent job for an animated show with only 8 episodes to humanize these characters so well and flesh them out so well. Not just the main 2, but all of the characters in the show. So I understand them even when they're making dark decisions or when they have these emotional moments. I really feel them. Phenomenal. Just bravo to this show. It was truly a masterclass in storytelling. And I was just here for it. The last 30 minutes of the finale were also great, sort of a lot of setting us up emotionally for next season, the new status quo, which I'm sure won't exist for long, but we have the Guardians sort of accepting the role of being Guardians. They're finally become a team together. The setup of, like, a possible force, the coalition of planets, a possible force going up against the Viltrum Empire. Obviously, Omni-Man has disappeared and gone somewhere, which has never happened before. We got the montage of all the villains that Mark has faced throughout the season sort of being set up so we can sort of, like, see that there's some other stuff that Mark's going to have to deal with, which was really nice, and sort of like seeing, like, oh, they're sort of setting up all these Chekhov's guns to be knocked up. And that's another thing too. The show sets up storylines and pays them off very effectively, and so I'm also pleased for that. Yeah, at the end of the day, I'm so excited that this show got announced for a season 2 and a season 3. I also just ordered the compendium for this comic because I am just so down to read. I want to know everything right now. So I actually ordered the first compendium. I'm going to have it in the other room, and I'm going to start reading it this week. By the way, if anyone wants me to do reviews of that, let me know down in the comments of the comic version of this storyline. But ultimately, this was a true gem of a show, and I am so excited for it to come back. I'm honestly going to be jonesing for more. I'm glad I have the comic at least to get me through. And just all around a phenomenal show that for me feels like it replaces that sort of hole that Game of Thrones left in my heart, which is saying something because I thought The Boys, a very similar show on Amazon Prime, was that show too, because I really love that show as well. But this one might have supplanted it, which I'm surprised by because I really like The Boys quite a bit. They're my boys. Of course I like my boys. So yeah. What did you think of Invincible? I'd love to hear all your thoughts down in the comments below. Let me know your review of Season 1 of Invincible. Are you going to read the comics? Do you want me to review the comics on this channel? Let me know. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel as well. We're building out this channel. It's a brand new channel, so I really am hopefully trying to get as many subscribers as possible to sort of help me sort of build this thing out. I would really appreciate if you could hit the subscribe down there. But beyond all of that, and also don't forget I have the main channel. I have a Patreon that you can help me out on. I have a podcast called What the Frel as well. But beyond all of that stuff, I am just glad that you stopped by, and I hope that you, as always, live long and stay sexy.